Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Tommy. So I'm right in the middle of building a farm table for a buddy of mine, and he wanted me to taper the legs on this table. And I've never done that before, so I started looking online for some ideas on how to go about doing that. And I came across a really simple jig at findwoodworking.com. And basically, the jig is just two pieces of wood that have been screwed together at a 90-degree angle, and a screw that's been added right here at the base. So basically, this face goes up against your table saw fence, and your leg that you want to taper goes up against this face. It makes contact up here, but down here you can adjust this screw to increase or decrease the amount of taper you want on the leg. And then you just push this thing through the table saw. This little part down here is what holds your leg and pushes your leg through. And it works really great. And so in this video, I'm just gonna show you how I went about building this thing to make sure it was straight and square. So the first thing I did was I picked a couple of pieces of wood from my scrap pile and jointed a face and an edge on each one of them. You may have noticed the piece of wood I used has a dado in it. That's not really important. It was just the only scrap I could find that was the right length. I could have removed the dado, but that would have been more work, and I was trying to get this thing done quickly. Then I cleaned up one opposing edge on the table saw. Then I moved over to the miter saw and squared up the ends. Once I had the ends squared up, I just put them together by hand to make sure that they were square before I started drilling any holes. Then I found some screws that would be a good length, and I clamped them up in the position I wanted them to be screwed in. I drilled some pilot holes, and then I drilled a couple of counter bores just to make sure that the heads of the screws were below the surface. Once I put the screws in, I just checked it again to make sure everything was still perfectly square. I was going to drill a pilot hole for the screw that sets the amount of the taper. The only problem with that is now the bottom portion of the fence was in the way. So I had to take the jig apart in order to be able to fit the drill in there to drill that hole. Once I had the hole drilled, I put the jig back together and set the screw in place. And that's really all there was to building the jig. In order to use it, I just lined up my leg with the jig and then unscrewed the screw until it looked like it was at the dimension I had drawn on the leg. If I wanted to be more precise about it, I could have measured the distance that the screw was sticking out to make sure it was the exact distance, but it looked close enough to me. And from this angle, you should be able to see exactly how this thing creates a taper on the leg. In order to make the cut, you just set your table saw's fence so that the blade approximates the very beginning of the mark you've drawn on the leg for your taper. So with the screw set to that first level you choose, you'll be able to cut two faces of the leg. Now, if you want to do all four faces of the leg, you're going to have to adjust the screw. The reason being is because when you try to cut a face that's opposite of one you've already cut, that material's already been removed. So you're going to have to double that distance. What I did was I cut two faces on all four of the legs to start. Then I adjusted the screw to the next level, which is twice the first level. Then I cut the remaining two faces on all four of the legs. It worked out pretty good. So here I was just playing around with setting up the legs in different ways so I could see if the tapers were all even. And they turned out really good. And then just to clean things up, I put a chamfer on all 4 of the edges, on all 4 of the legs, with a hand plane. This just helps make them a little stronger because those sharp edges on the legs are really easy to ding. So the legs came out really great. I couldn't be happier with how the legs turned out. And at the same time, I couldn't be happier with this jig either. I saw a bunch of other jigs that involved building a sled first and had knobs and screws and clamps, and like that's cool and everything, but this thing was so dead simple to make. It only took me about 15 minutes and it worked perfectly. I really couldn't imagine anything working more perfectly or more simply than this did. Hey, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Until next time, I hope you have fun building something.